Sun Tzu's name carries a very specific weight today. You hear him quoted by tech executives in boardrooms, by coaches in locker rooms, and by internet entrepreneurs looking for an edge. He is almost universally treated as a mystical philosopher of victory. We tend to view the art of war as a manual for dominating your opponents. We assume it is a masterclass in battlefield psychology, built to teach leaders how to crush their enemies and achieve glorious triumphs. Strip away the modern mythology, however, and you find an entirely different author. Sun Tzu had absolutely no interest in battlefield glory. He was obsessed with avoiding combat entirely, driven by a deep understanding of the catastrophic financial cost attached to every swung sword. During the 6th and 5th centuries BCE, China was a deeply fractured landscape of competing kingdoms. Warfare itself was rapidly scaling up. The old tradition of small, aristocratic chariot duels was giving way to the sudden mobilization of massive peasant infantries. Putting tens of thousands of men into the field created logistical demands that earlier generations couldn't have imagined. These new mega armies required an absolute tidal wave of resources, endless streams of grain, forged metal, complex supply wagons, and heavy taxation. This continuous escalation forced rival states to conduct full-scale stress tests of their own economies. Every time a king marched an army into the field, he was essentially taking out a massive loan against his kingdom's future, draining his treasury in the process. This is the environment that produced Sun Tzu. He did not arrive as a contemplative philosopher. He stepped in as a risk manager, hired to solve an acute economic crisis that happened to be disguised as a military one. The very first line of his text sets the parameters clearly. War is of vital importance to the state. He means vital in the sense of a vital organ, highly vulnerable, massively disruptive to the system, and capable of causing a total societal collapse. He recognized that the exact moment an army mobilizes, a running meter starts. The state instantly begins hemorrhaging capital to pay and feed a sprawling, expensive network of armorers, cooks, craftsmen, and soldiers. This diagram maps out the brutal logic of ancient supply chains. You can see the home base here, and as the army moves further out, the cost to transport grain to the front lines spikes exponentially. Distance multiplies financial exposure. Notice what happens back at the origin point. Keeping that army in the field inherently strips the home base of its agricultural labor. The farms stop producing, accelerating the entire kingdom toward bankruptcy. This leads to a counterintuitive conclusion. A ruler's greatest existential threat is not the opposing army lined up across the valley. It is their own reckless military spending. If you apply this economic lens, the book stops reading like ancient poetry and starts functioning like a corporate spreadsheet, tracking every decision as a measure of opportunity cost. Take the famous line, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting." This translates directly to pure cost avoidance. It is the optimal strategy because it keeps your capital safely locked in the treasury. Speed is the essence of war, is an instruction on burn rate reduction. Rapid maneuvering is a mathematical trick to limit your exposure to the massive daily expenses of a prolonged deployment. Even his heavy reliance on spies and foreknowledge is actually a preference for high ROI data gathering. Marching 50,000 men in the wrong direction burns a colossal amount of money. Paying a single spy to intercept a message costs practically nothing and achieves the exact same strategic outcome. Deception, speed, and intelligence gathering are often viewed as secondary tricks. To Sun Tzu, they are the primary tools of statecraft, entirely because they are the cheapest options available. The kingdoms of antiquity proved his thesis in real time. States that poured their wealth into drawn-out sieges imploded. The ones that wielded war sparingly, treating it as a precise financial instrument, survived the era. Jump forward to the modern era, and governments consistently repeat the exact mistake Sun Tzu warned against. They enter conflicts without accurately calculating the long-term economic strain. Look at these soldiers eating from metal mess tins in the trenches of World War I. Now multiply that single meal by millions of men, every single day, for years. The sheer logistical weight of feeding and arming that massive humanity collapsed entire empires. Later in the century, the Soviet Union faced a similar reality in Afghanistan. Look at this massive pile of spent brass artillery casings we soldiers are resting on. Each one of those shells represents burned capital. The campaign ended because the underlying economic model collapsed under an unsustainable burn rate. The historical pattern holds up across millennia. Prolonged warfare erodes a state's economic foundation far faster and more thoroughly than an opposing army ever could. Today, the geopolitical landscape relies almost entirely on Sun Tzu's cheaper alternatives rather than deploying massed conventional armies. We use modern equivalents for his cost avoidance strategies: cyber warfare, targeted financial sanctions, and covert proxy operations. All of these tools aim to inflict maximum systemic disruption with minimal financial exposure. This reframes how we should define national power. A nation's true strength doesn't come strictly from the size of its military budget. It comes from economic resilience, supply chain stability, and the structural capacity to absorb external shocks. Ultimately, the art of war reveals itself as a masterpiece of restraint. True victory is never defined by conquering a city. True victory is achieving your strategic goals without having to repair a bankrupt economy when the fighting stops.